Sarah Matthews thought she knew everything about her husband Tom, until one family gathering revealed a chilling secret involving his own sister Lisa, and set off a chain of events no one in the family would ever forget. Sarah Matthews had always believed she was living the kind of life most people only dreamed of. Her days started early, waking up before sunrise to prepare breakfast and lunch for her two children, Ava and Liam, before heading off to teach English at the local high school. She took pride in her work, was well liked by her students and respected by her colleagues. At home, she was known as the glue that held everything together, organized, warm, dependable. Her husband Tom was equally admired. He was a civil engineer, known for his problem-solving skills and calm demeanor. Together, they were the golden couple of their quiet suburban neighborhood. Friends often commented on how perfect their relationship seemed. They had met in college and quickly became inseparable, building a life together based on trust, laughter, and shared goals. Tom was the kind of man who never raised his voice, who helped with homework, made Sunday pancakes, and never missed a family birthday. On the surface, their lives looked flawless. Behind the carefully arranged smiles and family photos and social media posts, Sarah believed she had found her forever person. Their social calendar was always full: barbecues, family dinners, school events. Tom's younger sister, Lisa, was also a regular presence in their lives. Lisa had gone through a rough patch a few years earlier after a breakup, and had stayed with Sarah and Tom for a few months to get back on her feet. Sarah had welcomed her without hesitation, wanting to support family through difficult times. The two women were close, or at least they had been. But lately, Sarah had felt a strange shift. Nothing concrete, just a vague discomfort she couldn't quite put her finger on. Tom and Lisa always got along well. As siblings, they were close in age and had grown up leaning on each other after their parents' messy divorce. Sarah had admired their bond for years, even envied it. But recently, there had been moments that left her uneasy. Whispers between the two that stopped the moment she entered the room. Inside jokes she didn't understand. Quick glances that felt loaded with something unspoken. She told herself it was her imagination. She was tired, overworked, probably reading too much into nothing. But still, the feeling lingered. One night, as she lay in bed beside Tom, she stared at the ceiling in the dark, her mind circling the same questions. Had something changed? Or had it always been this way, and she was only now seeing it? She shook the thoughts away, reminding herself that Tom had never given her a real reason to doubt him. He had been her rock for over a decade. They had built a life, a family. People didn't just throw that away. Still, a sense of unease had begun to take root, quietly spreading in the corners of her mind like a shadow she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just intuition. It was a slow realization, a sinking feeling that something she couldn't explain was beginning to unravel. She didn't know it yet, but everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her family, and her own judgment was about to be turned inside out. All it would take was one moment, one chance discovery, to shatter the illusion for good. The evening that changed everything started like any other family gathering, warm, familiar, and filled with the comforting noise of people who had known each other for years. It was Tom's father's birthday, and nearly everyone in the family had shown up for the celebration. Laughter echoed through the spacious home, plates clinked in the kitchen, and the scent of roasted meat and freshly baked bread lingered in the air. Sarah moved from room to room, chatting with cousins, helping set the table and keeping an eye on the kids who were chasing each other in the backyard. Tom was somewhere in the mix, always good at floating through social settings with a drink in hand and a friendly smile. Lisa had arrived earlier, her arms full of gifts and desserts. She hugged Sarah tightly, complimented her dress, and disappeared into the kitchen. Everything felt normal, but underneath the surface something tugged at Sarah's attention. It started when she noticed Lisa brushing past Tom in the hallway. A simple moment, a passing touch. But something about it seemed too natural, too practiced. Later, Sarah saw them again, this time on the back patio. Most of the guests were indoors, but Tom and Lisa stood close together, speaking quietly. Their heads leaned in, voices low, eyes focused on each other. Sarah stood at the window, watching without meaning to. She couldn't hear a word, but the body language told its own story. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was familiarity. Sarah blinked hard, telling herself she was overthinking things. After all, they were siblings. They had every reason to be close. And yet, her heart began to race in a way she couldn't explain. As the evening continued, Sarah tried to distract herself. She played with the children, helped her mother-in-law refill drinks, and made conversation with Tom's cousins. Still, her eyes drifted back to Tom and Lisa again and again, noting how they seemed to always be near each other even when mingling with others. When the birthday cake was brought out and the family gathered to sing, Sarah stood beside Tom, trying to feel normal, trying to remind herself of who they were. But even then, Tom kept glancing past her, his gaze searching, landing on Lisa more than once. The moment that truly shifted everything came unexpectedly. Sarah was chatting with one of Tom's cousins in the living room. They were reminiscing about past holidays, joking about old family dramas when the cousin casually mentioned something that made Sarah's stomach turn. He laughed and said, "Remember when Lisa was living with you guys? Man, I used to joke they acted more like a couple than siblings." Sarah didn't laugh. She stared at him, her mouth dry. The cousin didn't seem to notice, already moving on to another topic, but Sarah couldn't hear anything else. The room blurred, the voices faded, and all she could hear was that one sentence repeating over and over in her mind. A chill crept down her spine. It had been a throwaway comment, not meant to be taken seriously. But to Sarah it was confirmation. Confirmation that the strange behavior, the closeness, the secrecy, hadn't all been in her head. For the first time she allowed herself to wonder, what if there was more to Tom and Lisa's relationship than anyone had ever admitted? The seed of doubt was no longer just a whisper. It was a roaring certainty she could no longer ignore. The days following the party were a blur for Sarah. She moved through her routines like a shadow, doing everything she was supposed to do but feeling disconnected from it all. She dropped the kids off at school, graded papers, answered emails, made dinner. Yet her mind was somewhere else, trapped in a loop of suspicion and fear. Every time she glanced at Tom, she wondered what she wasn't seeing. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it might be something that confirmed she was wrong. But deep down she knew she wasn't. She started watching more closely. Tom was good at covering his tracks, but Sarah had the advantage of knowing him better than anyone. He had tells, small changes in behavior that might not seem strange to others, but that stood out to her now. He was more protective of his phone, more distant when they were alone, and unusually quick to dismiss questions about his day. Whenever Lisa's name came up, he answered too quickly, or changed the subject altogether. Sarah noticed it all. Late one night, after Tom had fallen asleep, Sarah sat in the dark with his phone in her hands. Her hands trembled not from guilt but from fear. Fear of what she might find and fear of what it would mean if she did. She had never snooped before, never felt the need to. But now, with everything she'd seen, it felt like the only option left. The phone was locked, but Sarah had seen him type in his code enough times to know it by heart. Her heart pounded as the screen lit up. At first, everything looked normal. Texts from coworkers, a few emails, harmless group chats. But when she scrolled deeper, she found a hidden folder in his messaging app. It was labeled simply with a single letter, L. Inside were messages that weren't outright incriminating, but they were far from innocent. The tone was overly affectionate, and the content didn't read like the usual sibling banter. Messages like, "Can't stop thinking about that night," and "We have to be more careful," made Sarah's stomach turn. There were references to private meetups, cryptic discussions about how things got out of control, and emojis that didn't belong in a conversation between family members. Sarah sat frozen for what felt like hours. She reread the messages again and again, hoping somehow she was misunderstanding. But there was no denying it. Something intimate had happened between Tom and Lisa. The evidence wasn't just in the words, but in the tone, the secrecy, the way they spoke to each other as if they shared something no one else could understand. She put the phone down and stared at the wall, her mind blank. The betrayal was overwhelming. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was who it was with. Someone from within her own family. Someone she had trusted. Someone she had opened her home to. Sarah didn't cry, she didn't scream. Instead, a numb silence took over, a cold and steady stillness that settled deep in her chest. The truth was finally in front of her, and it was worse than anything she had imagined. There was no going back. Now that she knew, the only question left was what she would do with it. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay still in bed, listening to the rhythmic sound of Tom's breathing beside her, trying to make sense of the storm inside her. Her thoughts were tangled. Memories of birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, the promises he made, the way he looked at their children. All of it had meant something to her. Now, those same memories felt hollow, tainted by what she knew. Every gesture, every word, every smile seemed like part of a lie she hadn't noticed until it was too late. By morning, her numbness had hardened into resolve. She couldn't keep this inside any longer. She needed answers. Not for closure, because no explanation could fix this, but because she needed to look Tom in the eyes and hear the truth. She waited until the kids had left for school and the house was quiet, the sun just beginning to spill across the living room floor. Tom came into the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone like it was any other day. But when he saw Sarah standing there, arms crossed, her face pale and still, he stopped. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She simply told him what she found. The texts, the hidden folder, the late-night messages. Every word out of her mouth was sharp, but controlled. She had rehearsed it all night. Tom didn't deny it. At first he said nothing at all. Then slowly, with a look of shame that couldn't undo anything, he admitted to it. Not in detail, but enough. He said it had started during the time Lisa was living with them. It had been emotional at first, then it crossed a line that should have never been approached, let alone crossed. He said it was over, that it had been a mistake, that he regretted it every day. Sarah didn't believe him. Regret wasn't enough. Regret didn't explain why he had continued the contact, why the messages were so recent, why he still looked for Lisa in a crowded room. The more he talked, the less she wanted to hear. The betrayal was too deep, too personal. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a violation of trust on multiple levels. Her husband, her sister-in-law, her home. Everything felt contaminated by the truth. Tom begged her not to tell anyone. He said it would destroy the family, that it was a private matter. But to Sarah, it was no longer just about their marriage. It was about honesty. About not allowing herself to be silenced by shame that wasn't even hers to carry. She walked out of the room without saying another word. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. The man she had loved for so many years was a stranger now. Someone who had lived two lives while pretending to be someone he wasn't. And Lisa, someone she had once considered a sister and a friend, had crossed a boundary that could never be repaired. Sarah knew the fallout would be massive. Families would fracture, people would choose sides. But the truth had to come out. She wasn't going to protect those who had betrayed her. Not anymore. The next time they were all together, she would make sure everyone knew what had really been going on behind closed doors. The day of the next family gathering arrived faster than Sarah expected. It was Lisa's birthday this time, and her parents had insisted on hosting a small dinner to celebrate. Tom didn't push Sarah to attend, probably sensing she was on the edge of something irreversible. But she went anyway, not because she wanted to see anyone, but because she had made up her mind. The truth had lived in the shadows long enough. She had spent too many years believing in an illusion, and now that it had shattered, there was no point in pretending. She dressed with care that evening, not to impress but to feel composed, in control. As she arrived with her children, who were still blissfully unaware of everything unraveling beneath the surface, she was met with the usual chorus of greetings and laughter. Lisa greeted her with a smile that barely masked the nervousness in her eyes. Tom stood nearby, quiet and cautious, avoiding Sarah's gaze. He hadn't spoken much since their confrontation, staying distant, careful, waiting to see what she would do. Dinner began like all the others. Light conversation, inside jokes, plates passed around the table. Sarah participated just enough to keep things normal for her kids. But as the meal wound down and the birthday cake was brought out, she felt her heart start to pound. This was the moment. She looked around the table at the people who had always believed in their family's closeness, the ones who had no idea what had been hidden right in front of them. As Lisa's family began to sing, Sarah slowly stood up. At first, no one noticed, but when her voice cut through the music, steady and clear, the room fell silent. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply told them what had happened. That her husband Tom had been unfaithful. That it wasn't with a stranger or a colleague, but with someone sitting at the very table. The silence that followed was complete. Faces froze in disbelief. Some looked at Tom, others at Lisa. Lisa's expression crumbled first. Shock, shame, panic, all fighting for space. Tom looked like he wanted to disappear, but Sarah stayed calm. She wasn't there to argue or answer questions. She was there to tell the truth, and she had done that. People began to speak, stammering questions, shocked murmurs, angry outbursts. But Sarah didn't stay to listen. She gathered her children, who still didn't fully understand what was happening, and walked out of the house without looking back. In the days that followed, the fallout was as brutal as she expected. Phone calls poured in. Some were supportive, some were angry, some begged for silence. But Sarah didn't waver. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. Not from the pain, but from the weight of pretending. She filed for divorce, cut off contact with Lisa, and began the slow, difficult process of rebuilding her life. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, but it was honest. And that, she realized, was more valuable than the illusion of a perfect life. She had faced the truth, spoken it out loud, and walked away with her dignity intact. Sarah had lost her marriage, her trust, and a piece of her past. But in its place she found something stronger. Herself.